All right, welcome to Old School. Cenk, Mark Thompson, David Shuster, everybody. Look at this.
And hey, this is the first time on Old School, and I just want to say, Cenk, I am ready to promote your father's book. I'm ready for
it. Okay, look, that's really the only qualification you need for this. So check. Nicely done. Good. Okay. So David, of course, is the star of Rebel Headquarters. Check out our channel RHQ all over YouTube, Facebook, tyt.com. It doesn't matter. David's absolutely killing it. So it's great to have him here. Obviously, formerly of MSNBC, Al Jazeera, and the list goes on. Okay. So Old School brought to you by twostrongcoffee.com. So, that's a new mug. That's not out yet. Oh, I'm gonna hide it. Okay, twostrong.coffee.com/TYT, organic, fair trade, Mark Thompson approved.
Yes.
You can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and our other sponsors, our other made-up sponsor, they're both made-up sponsors to some degree, is shoptyt.com. Mark's, as always, sporting that great TYT hat.
Love the merch, love the merch.
I went old school with this. Now I love that this is old school now. I went old school with this shirt.
Oh yeah, yes you did.
Yeah.
I told you I have the very stable Genius sweatshirt, and I have realized that in certain crowds, no one knows what it actually refers to.
Totally, 100%.
So they think I'm wearing a shirt that reflects my own vision of myself. It's very funny.
Yeah, which it sounds like that could make for more interesting conversations.
That's true too, potentially, yeah.
And in fact, I was wearing our new shirt, the Anti-Vaxxer Club, and that
I
one
haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's great. It's gold, because what happens is people pause, and then they give you like the squint, which is like, I'm getting ready to be angry. I'm squinting to see exactly what your shirt says, and then they go like this. Oh, and you go from the squint to the oh, and then tons of people have been like, oh, I like that. Where'd you get that? I'm like, sponsor of Old School, not a big deal. Shop2at.com. All right, so let's get on to unimportant things. David, I want to talk about your life a little bit in a second.
Oh, no. Yeah, okay.
But Mark, while we were about to get on air, brought up that he's part of a wine club, and there's no way I'm not going to hit that and hit it hard.
Well, and I have to, if you will, allow me. It makes it sound like Cenk, David, I'm part of a wine club. It sounds like I was dropping it in that way. That's not the way I was saying it. I have crap everywhere related to this wine club that I joined, and so I was trying to clear a space to begin this. I was saying, I'm part of this wine club. I was saying it almost in an annoyed way. But it is funny because this wine club, I've never been part of a wine club before, does send me tons of wine. I guess that's the idea behind a wine club. But there is a quality of like a sorcerer's apprentice kind of endless stream. The doorbell just keeps ringing, and it's one case of wine after another. And I am running out of space in the home to keep it. And I'm trying to slow down the shipments, Well,
I'm glad you're explaining that it has to do with your mess, because I thought, Mark, you were bringing it up because maybe you'd had a couple extra glasses tonight and just wanted to tell us in advance.
There is that.
If you're slurring your speech or whatnot, and that's okay. No judgment. It's all good.
Yeah,
it's all good. If you want to make it about your space, that's fine.
It has been I would happily cop to having a cocktail, and actually I would normally on Old School in the old days, in the old school. We used to crack beer, and they actually would ask you, "Oh, what kind of beer would you like for the panel on Old School tonight? Would you like?" And then they'd tell you, "We've got a hops this, and we've got a that," and it was like all very kind of microbrewery friendly beer. Now it's COVID, so I'm locked in with case after case of wine, and typically I would have a little taste. But the point is simply, this is a great thing. The idea behind this wine club is that it supports small wineries and vintners around the world. What's that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm getting is that I single-handedly am supporting small vintners and wineries around the world. That's what I'm getting.
Yes.
It's really out of control. And So here's the problem, and then I'll stop. But I'm kind of being filled with anxiety about my drinking of wine because my girlfriend doesn't drink at all, and I'm going through all this wine. And as I started to like put on weight for COVID, not a lot. I still looked pretty damn good, but I'm just saying. But enough that I felt I needed to lose it. I needed to eliminate the wine, and that's hard when you've got wine bottles, that you're stepping over on your way to move other wine bottles, and you're the only person in the house drinking. So I'm trying to cut back on my wine intake, even as the shipments keep arriving. So that's what I'm dealing with now.
Yeah, Mark. No, I can totally relate. I had the same issue with meth. My wife just won't do any. She's like, "Oh, I like my teeth." Whatever. Okay, keep your teeth. It's pretty elitist, but
well, she's an enabler because she goes, you know what? The buzzed Mark Thompson is a lot better than the sober Mark Thompson. I think you ought to have some wine. It's like, all right.
I don't know, Mark. You might be due for a new girlfriend if you keep drinking alone for too long. So I'm just saying.
Well,
so David, you and I have done many stories where you do the money in politics angle, and then it turns out Karl Rove's charitable organization has the same PO box as his political group, and it turns out it's all really the same pack and stuff. I have a sense that we're gonna find out about Mark's Wine Club that it has the same PO box as the AA in the neighborhood. Right? They're like, no, just keep sending it to him. No, don't eat. It doesn't matter. We don't care what he paid for.
You just think that the Mark Thompson building fund is really going towards his building. It's actually going for a stash of alcohol. But that's okay.
Look, the good news is when you kids come visit someday, there'll be wine for there'll be goodie bags and they'll be filled with wine. So,
well, that sounds good. So, okay, but the reason I brought it up isn't any of that. And let me out Mark, okay? Before we got on air, here's how he said he was in the wine club. He's like, Chops, I do declare, I really enjoy the wine club. It's quite spectacular. And he had his monocle in. He's now taking it out.
Yeah.
You know how this stuff goes.
My cravat.
Yeah.
My cravat.
Yes. Okay, no, in all seriousness, the reason I brought it up, well, not in all seriousness, barely any seriousness. Yeah. But the reason I brought it up is because I was curious. So how much wine do you get in a wine club?
You get, I'm embarrassed to say, I almost don't really know. Here's how it works.
Perfect.
They send you a case.
At some point, but I just lost track.
Kind of like my wife and credit cards, they just keep coming and they just keep being spent, and you don't really know, and that's the excuse. I don't really know. They keep sending them to me. I gotta use them.
That is so much closer to the truth than I want to admit. I really, was cranked up and enthusiastic about joining this wine club. So I think I checked all the boxes for most frequent shipments initially because of my overzealousness. All I'm saying is I'm living now in a period of constant shipment, but I'm helping supposedly all these small vintners, and they throw in a bottle per case. So that's the best way to get me on anything. If I feel like I'm getting a deal, you get a $54 bottle of wine for free. All right, and then they do this last thing. They say, "Did you like that wine? It's in short supply. Can we put you on a list so that, when the new vintage comes out, you'll get it? Because otherwise, it's a very small crop." And I thought, oh yeah, I don't want to get iced out of that. They give you the myth of scarcity, that's a very powerful myth. And so I checked those boxes. So the answer, Cenk, is, literally the doorbell will ring while we're on, and I'm sure it'll be another case of wine. It comes quite frequently.
Okay. Is there a type of wine, Mark, that you've decided that you really like? I mean, you don't have to give an ad for it, but a particular, grape or vintage or style?
If it pours into a glass, David, I'm really about it. I had a rosé yesterday. I wake up with a Pinot Noir and I go to bed with a Cabernet. What can I say? It's I try to cover the bases. Yeah. So I actually do a radio show in San Francisco, and as you know, San Francisco Bay Area, there's a lot of wine in Sonoma County, and then also in the South Bay. There are actually vineyards all around the Bay Area, and there's one in Livermore. and it's in the East Bay. And I actually made a deal with them because they listen to the show all the time. And they'd sent an email for my own wine, the Mark Thompson blend of wine. Okay, I thought it would be a fun thing to do, and I'd give it away on the show. So I bought the wine. It's not like I was looking for a freebie. I bought the wine. It's got the label with my wine. This just happened. This is happened like an hour ago type thing. So today was the first day we announced it on the air that we're going to be giving away the wine. And what happens? The program director comes running into the studio and says, no, you can't. I mean, his head was exploding. And, we cannot give away liquor on the air. We cannot give away any wine on the air. And that's because of FCC regulations, you see. And so now, in addition to all the wine that I have in my wine club, I have cases of the Mark Thompson wine that I now cannot give away on the air. So I'm telling you, boys, I am hip deep in wine of all sorts. My own wine, other vintners' wine. It's an absolute tsunami of wine in my life.
Yeah. Trump is also filled to the rim with wine, but the other wine. So it's maybe he joined a club. Maybe that's what happened. We didn't realize it. He just keeps getting wine, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I won, but why they won't say I won? They say, oh, it's a free bottle. Okay, all right, and right, and my attorney general, he was not very strong. Like what? What I wasn't supposed to execute my vice president? These guys. Anyway, so Mark, I love what a sucker you are for that. Oh, this thing's gonna run out, man. I mean, we make it professionally for a living, but it's on the edge of running out. And you're like, hey, look, I'm on the edge with Mark Thompson. So
oh, that's good. I do a podcast called The Edge with Mark Thompson. Very good.
Okay. So Mark, at Too Strong Coffee, I mean, we put an extra couple of beans in each bag. And we're about to run out.
A mark when you see one. Mark's a mark. Yeah, it's last thing, and guys, I think this is the point to those who are sharing this time with us. I think you can be really smart about some of the big picture stuff. Like I feel like I'm pretty smart on some big picture stuff, and appropriately cynical when it comes to politics and it comes to public policy. And somehow you can be just so myopic and completely naive when it comes to other things, like what we've talked about here so far, and checking too many boxes, and earnestly feeling as though you're helping along this wine club or whatever it is, and I don't know.
No, and by the way, it's not always BS. So when I tell the audience it's time to panic, they really should panic. No, seriously, I don't say that unless there really is a limited quantity, right? So like Mark's hat, we were giving it away for members, not giving it away, but we're selling it, but it had member on the back. And we're so cheap, we really did a limited run, and they really did run out, right? And so that definitely happens. These mugs, they're and it's true that hey, ours is the Too Strong Coffee is organic and fair trade. And so when that your wine club tells you it's actually local wineries or small wineries, I hope to God they're not lying, is that most of the time is true, and that is great. And you should care about that, right? It's just when they generically say, all right, limited quantity, I don't know if it'll still be around.
Well, I just did this on a plane flight last night. It says only 4 tickets left at this price. And they go, oh man, only 4 tickets left. I mean, should we book this now? I know we're not sure we're gonna take the trip, but they said there are only 4 tickets left. I mean,
it works every time. It works every time.
Forgive me if I sound like an East Coast guy who's sort of out of it, but didn't a lot of the wineries burn down in the fires a year ago, 2 years ago?
Not a lot of them, but some of them. That's not that's a totally appropriate point. I mean, it's been a very tough couple of years in Sonoma County, in the North Bay, and it's been very, very difficult. So no, you're right. And honestly, I mean, they're threatened this year. I mean, the fire season, as you know, is longer and hotter and more intense than ever. And I think it's worth mentioning.
Given the risk of the business and what a difficult business it is, Mark, I think people should forgive you if you're a bit myopic and a bit too trusting of the wineries, and hopefully they are really small wineries and they really do need the help. And sure, I guess there's a room to be pessimistic about everything in life, but
Yeah, and the truth is that the vintners write back to you. Like if you write a positive review, they write back to you. So they're not so big that they're not,
No, I believe that. Maybe I'm a sucker too, but maybe I'm a sucker too, but I believe that. And so, like for example, no joke, this mug's coming out soon. It's not out yet, but you still get coffee and everything else at twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. But these are handmade. They're made in America, and it's from a really progressive woman, and she's an awesome small business owner that's super progressive. So it's true, things like that do happen, right? And it's great to support those businesses. And that's really why Mark's doing it. He's not even interested in wine. He's just trying to help. That's why he's going through a couple of bottles a night, because he's really, really charitable, trying to help. Okay.
When I was at the doctor's office, not to make this all about wine, but they say, well, so do you drink? I said, yeah, I'll drink. I'll have some wine. Well, how many glasses of wine do you have? Like 1 glass a day or, and I said, well, yeah, like 1 glass a day. Like, but wait, how big is that glass? I mean, I have a really, really big glass once a day. I was drinking at the height of the pandemic. I was drinking a bottle a day. Now, some people may not think that's a lot, but I'm really, when and you just sit there and you drink, it just happens. It just absolutely happens. Yeah.
Same thing with me, right? I mean, you do 1 line, and then next thing you know, you're doing 8 lines, right?
Look, I've backed off, everybody. Okay, this is my post problem confession. I found my way out of the wilderness. So,
somebody the other day was trying to talk me into shrooms and then even acid. Right? I was like, guys, the degree to which I am sky high on edibles is indescribable, right? Now, what do you think I look like on acid? Okay. So I'm like, no, we're not going in that direction. Okay. So that's why I joined the Shrooms Club. It's all local.
Cenk, in all seriousness, what was your vice that got you through the pandemic and the lockdowns and the mindlessness of everything? And I mean, all of us had our own vice or our own little sort of thing we did, whatever. What was yours?
Okay, that's a great question. So I did 2 things during the pandemic that stand out. Like when I look back and say, hey, you asked that same exact question, David, if you asked me 20 years from now, the vice is definitely edibles. I'm on the record on that. I'm surprised Mendoza Ferrer didn't hit me harder on that, because when I ran for office, they dredged up all this nonsense that the alt-right had originally found and stuff. But the establishment, like, I'm surprised they're not like, oh my God, he got so high once he trapped fear in a closet, right? And to be fair, I also released bliss into the universe. Anyways, but so I love edibles, and so that every once in a while that lifts the spirits, if you will, and so I freely admit to that, and it for me it intensifies everything, the senses, etc., taste most especially, and so I'm already a guy who likes to savor things. So when I'm that high on edibles, I think there's some chance I'm breaking world records on savor. I just like literally, they don't exist. They're never gonna exist. It's not a thing we can measure. But I will think to myself, like, I am not sure that anyone has ever enjoyed this salmon and cream cheese more than I have, like ever in human history. Okay, so that's pretty good. And then. But the other thing that I did that is not a vice, but that was different and strange and interesting is perambulate, ruminate, which makes sense since I come to root words from Rumi, a Turkish mystic. But I walked around the neighborhood for literally hours on end, or I sat on the couch for hours on end. These are things that I used to do anyway, but I did it on steroids during the pandemic. And I thought about life. I thought about just every aspect, business, media, politics, but mainly like, who am I? What do I want to do? How do I want to get there? And good news, David, I'm here to report I solved it.
Oh, good. You can tell the rest of us how do we get there?
Well, okay, so I'm obviously partly kidding, but the funny thing is I'm partly serious. The actual funny thing is that I'm partly serious.
But we have to buy the book to actually learn the secret.
Yeah. Yes, but
we have to join your book club. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, Mark, don't worry. I'm throwing in a chapter for free. Okay. You're gonna get 6, but all of a sudden, if you act now, I'll throw in the 7th chapter gratis. Okay. So seriously, the Justice Coming book that I'm working on, so justicecomingbook.com, that has nothing to do with any of this. Okay. Although it did help clarify some of the political thoughts that I had, and I think was a really important part of that process. But no, I'm going to write a book called The Point of Life, and it is going to sell 2 million copies at least. So you have that to look forward to, but it's going to take probably 10 years. After this book writing experience, I don't even want to look at a book for another 10 years. But no, in all seriousness, I figured out who I am, and then once you make peace with who you are, right, and you understand it, and furthermore you enjoy it, then you have tremendous peace of mind, and then you could actually be happy.
I don't know if I'd be happy being happy, to be honest, Cenk.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. A lot of people, it's in the culture actually, Mark. The culture tells you not to be happy. They think it's weird if you're happy, right? And then people try to talk you out of it. Like it's funny when I tell people that I'm really happy now, the number one reaction is incredible skepticism. Like they're like, and it's in the culture, right? They're like, oh, sure you are. Right? Because who's really happy? Nobody, right? And then of course people don't really like to hear it because, who the hell wants to hear this ass going around like, hey guys, I'm really happy. Okay, nobody wants to hear that. But the only reason I say it is because look, we don't do any of this. This is not TYT. There's not anything. Nobody's selling anything until I sell the book 10 to 20 years from now, and you'll buy a copy. It'll be fine, right? But you actually can be happy. It's not easy, right? And the material world is real, and if you got to pay the rent, it gets even way more real. So it's not some sort of Shangri-La BS, right? It's not like, oh, okay, you have a permanent smile on your face. No, I get pissed in traffic. I get pissed at certain things that have happened online. It happens, right? But you bounce back 1,000 times quicker. Things bother you less, and because here, I'm going to tell you the very core of it, and then we'll probably move on. So the very, very core of it is once you realize that you don't have a choice but to be you, and that there's actually nothing wrong with you, that's it. That's when you feel like, oh, why didn't anybody ever tell me that before? It turns out there's really nothing I could do about it anyway, and I'm not so bad. And then you focus on the positive side of who you are. I bet I could do it with you guys. I mean, you give me, 10, 20 hours, right? And I'll get you to focus on unbelievably positive things about yourself and your life. And I think you walk out thinking, I don't want to, you know what? I'm not so bad. I kind of like being me.
Did this route of discovery involve therapy? I mean, because for me, and I've been in therapy for, 25 years, whatever it is, there's a lot of sort of self-discovery that comes with that, with having your sort of own time where you can step into the things that make you happy and the things that make you sad and really live and breathe it, and then make self-discoveries about yourself.
Yeah, no, so people have different names for what I did, right? And one is self-therapy and other is meditation, but I don't think about it that way in any of those ways. But there's nothing wrong with thinking about it that way. I just think about it as like, oh, I had some thinking to do. So I thought for several hundred hours and I solved it. So yeah, but in a sense, David, you're right. It's self-therapy. And what I did was like, I kind of talked to myself. Zephyr was one of the guys who works here, shot a lot of my campaign, had me mic'd all the time, right? And he said, Cenk, I don't know if you know this, but you talk to yourself a lot. Okay, so I caught a lot of your conversations between you and you, and I do. And I realize on the walks and when I'm sitting on the couch, I'm talking to myself, and I'm my own therapist. I think, well, okay, why do you think you're doing that? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? What does that mean, right? And why do you do that? What's the core reason you do that? And then should you? And is that a part of who you are, or is that something you were taught? And I came up with my own terminology for it. There's hardware and there's software. Hardware is who you are and your DNA and your genetics, good or bad, that's who you are. There's nothing you could do about it. And then there's software, which is the stuff that you're taught. And some of that is great and some of that is terrible. And people think there's nothing they can do about their software. That's not true. There's a lot you can do about your software. You could just strip out big portions of your coding that don't make any sense. So I can give you a super easy example to understand, and then it gets harder and harder as you go. But the most common example is religion. You're taught religion when you grow up. If you grow up even in a vaguely religious family, my family was very secular, but we were nominally Muslim, and so we believed, yay, Islam, right? And then I became more religious in college, et cetera. I don't want to drag it on. Last thing on it is, then I realized it's software, right? It's just something I was taught. It doesn't mean that it was right. And then when you reevaluate that software, you go, and this is what I did way back in the day, right? This is not the recent thing. I read the Quran and I was like, that's questionable coding. And then I read the Bible and I was like, it didn't get any better. And I mean, you read the Old Testament, and if you still want that software, have at it, Hoss. Okay. But it's not for me. I want to move on to David's life.
So my Bible club is clearly out. Honey, scratch it. He's not going to be interested. I'm just learning.
You get free Bibles every day. You got to get a different Bible.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anyone more disastrous to ask to a Bible club than me. Right? You're better off like asking a random Satanist, because some of them are good, smart atheists, and they're just taking on the Satanist title for fun. Right? Most of them. But most of them aren't going to know the Bible nearly as well as I do. And I can quote Bibles with the best of them, and not a pretty picture.
Listening to atheists who can throw the stars of the equivalent of the martial arts stars of Bible quotes at other believers who also throw the martial arts stars of Bible quotes. That's like one of the best shows in town. You know what I mean? Just to watch you guys go at it. So I know it'll never happen, but it would have been fun.
Yeah. And look, I feel bad. I don't want to talk about it too much because I think there's such great religious folks, and
religion has been a great source of comfort for so many people through some very, very difficult things. But I think I understand what you're saying or what you're implying, which has to do with belief structure and perhaps a worldview that is less than healthy. So.
Yeah, I mean, look, putting aside the more touchy topic of religion, honor is a perfect example of it, right? If somebody teaches you about how to be honorable, watch out. Half the time it's going to lead to, and the way that you really protect the honor of the family and the tribe is murder, of course. And so, there's so much bad coding you get. Oh, these rules. Well, who came up with the rules? Oh, some guy 200 years ago or 2,000 years ago, a rabbi 2,600 years ago came up with the rule. What the hell would he know? He didn't know anything. He thought they thought the sky was, the stars were pinholes in heaven, and you were seeing the light from the heaven. You know why? Because Darwin wasn't born yet, and neither was Einstein or Newton or anything. We didn't know anything, and so I don't blame the rabbi either. He was like, I don't know. Is it mainly about the foreskin? I'm guessing foreskin. Okay, people wrote down foreskin. That's the most important thing, right? What's the second most important thing? I don't know, bacon. And they're like, which way you want to go with it? No. Everybody's like, really? No. We're going no. All right, I guess it's no. Okay.
Well, the real truth about all that is that there are real societal factors that led to some of those. All this stuff, but I'm saying that, but by draping it in religion and religious doctrine, you were able to get into certain societal norms that you needed to have established in order to run a well-oiled machine of society, and that's what religion was helpful in doing. So that's part of a different conversation. But anyway, yeah,
of course, and it made sense at the time. And number one thing Muslims say is, the Prophet Muhammad actually gave women a lot more rights than they had at the time. So the Quran was a very progressive document at the time, which is definitely true. It's historically true. At the same time, can we get the 7th chapter for free? When do we get the update, right? Shouldn't we update it so women have equal rights? And how come none of the gods ever heard of Indonesia? Right? Right, and God bless the Indonesians. They're very Muslim. It's the biggest Muslim country in the world, right? Yet God never mentions Southeast Asia in the Quran, the Bible, or any of the other texts. It's funny how he forgot it, or maybe he didn't care. But anyways, I'm getting too deep into it. If you're religious, I love you. I love your faith. Keep the faith. Lose the dogma. Okay, all right. So David, speaking of which, how'd you grow up? Where did you grow up? What did you start with my question that's a little funny, but I like it. What did your parents do? So start us out.
Wow. So this will sound familiar to a lot of people, I suppose, because I think there are a lot of people who grew up this way. I grew up in the Midwest. My parents were college professors, so they were transplants from other places. My dad was from Montreal. My mom was from the New York City area. But they ended up getting their doctoral dissertations in the Midwest and getting their teaching jobs in Bloomington, Indiana. So I grew up a Hoosier, a half mile from the IU campus. Older brother and younger brother. I was the consummate sort of middle brother who was always trying to, keep everybody sort of calm and keep the family sort of running. And then I just sort of felt, there was a fair amount of tumult when I was sort of growing up. And I like to tell people, sometimes people say, hey, how did you get in the news business? And I tell people that there was a lot of tumult between my parents at a certain age, but the one thing our family always sort of calmed down and had a sort of reasonable discussion about was the news. We just watched the news all the time and we talked about the news. And so sometimes my own sort of psychoanalysis, as I've discovered the last several years, I think one of the reasons I went in the news business is because, well, that was something that was so comfortable both to my parents and also to our family that it felt sort of safe, and was something that I guess sort of got to know a lot about because I would gravitate towards things that were sort of calm and enriching, and as opposed to some of the chaos. But anyway, grew up in Bloomington, Indiana. As a result, was a big IU basketball fan. Went to college at the University of Michigan just because I needed to get away from the IU campus. And then just sort of at one point thought, I'm going to be part of I love politics and government. I thought I'm going to be part of the diplomatic corps someday and travel around the world and be in the foreign service because I like, all things sort of international. And then I had not a bad experience, but I went and did an internship in Washington, D.C. one summer in college. I hated working on the Hill. Hated the member of Congress and how they sort of treated me, the politics of it, but I was sort of intrigued and sort of watching it all. So when I went back to college and somebody said, hey, well, if you like Washington, why don't you see it from the perspective of a journalist? I mean, you're doing some stuff at the campus radio station. And I said, yeah, but I'm doing sports. And that has nothing to, I said, just do an internship at CNN or NBC or one of those, and maybe you'll have a good time. And so I did an internship at CNN. This would be back in 1989. And I suddenly discovered, wow, this journalism thing is kind of fun. And I just sort of fell into it that way. So,
okay, I love so many parts of that story. First of all, I like that your family lives in the bizarro world where there's tumult everywhere except news, which is calming. Right. When does that happen? It definitely wasn't the Trump years, that's for sure.
Yeah. And no, back in the day when there were 3 evening newscasts. I think our family was a Walter Cronkite CBS family until 1981, and then a Dan Rather family from 81 until I went off to college. And I think my mom watched Tom Brokaw, and but anyway, it was just they were all kind of doing kind of the same stories. We would read, the same newspapers, the Washington Post, the local Bloomington Herald Times, which took a lot of stories from the Washington Post. And so it was just, there was sort of agreement on what was happening around the world. The disagreement came in, well, why is it happening? And we would have endless conversations about politics and international relations and wars and racism and police and all the sort of things that would sort of bubble up. None of us, it was kind of a very sort of protected environment. I won't say that Bloomington and my crowd was the most diverse. There were a couple African American kids, a couple Asian American kids, but mostly all middle class, none especially wealthy, none especially poor, all fairly homogeneous. So it really took sort of getting out into the world, I'd say, after college and traveling around to really sort of discover some things that I didn't get to see growing up.
There's a lot I can relate to in your story, but one thing I want to make note of, it's really interesting. I'd say like a solid third of all progressives have parents who are teachers or professors. Mm-hmm. And so if you said to me, name a profession that is likely to lead to progressive children, I would definitely say teacher, right? And I hear the same story, David, from a lot of those folks, that there was conversations around the kitchen table, and it wasn't just about news or politics, and it wasn't indoctrination. It was quite the opposite. That it invited different thoughts and talking through why and how that led to it. What is, of course, in my opinion, the correct answers. Does that sound like what happened at your house?
Yeah, I would also say that was sort of the opposite of materialism. There was no materialism in a college community. You were sort of judged in a sense by, the prowess of your ideas, your academic achievement. How much could you think? How much could you prove? How many facts could you assemble and cobble together? And so, there were some kids who had bigger houses and some kids who had smaller houses. But again, the families that really stood out, the ones that everybody admired, were the ones, well, this guy has just published his 12th book as a full professor in chemistry or the business school or literature or whatever it was. And that was, so there was such a regard for academia and for thought and for thinking and critical thinking and science. And I think that was just sort of drilled into so many of us that I grew up with. And so again, I think I was blessed in a way that I never saw incredible materiality, so never really felt like that was something I needed to pursue. Never really felt like there were life's toys that I need to have. Family was incredibly important, but also academic rigor and digging into things and really trying to understand things and really trying to be able to explain things. And so I think, yeah, as a result, coming from an academic family, and I see this in a lot of the friends that I grew up with, who also I think landed on the same sort of political spectrum. You would think that in Southern Indiana, a very conservative part of a very conservative state, even though Bloomington sort of is this liberal oasis, that there would be at least some kids from my high school who sort of landed maybe towards the right, because Bloomington included not only the college kids, but there were kids whose families worked in town or worked in the limestone quarries, whatever it was. But I would say 90%. Maybe close to 90% of the kids, I'd say, and I've seen it because of all the Facebook connections that everybody has made. I mean, I've been talking with kids from high school that I didn't talk to 15 years ago because there was no Facebook, but everybody's sort of come back together. And I found that the politics almost uniformly sort of lines up towards the progressive side. I mean, there are gradations here and there, but I think it's something about growing up in an environment where, for the most part, people put a value on sort of how you interact with other human beings, that how you achieve things sort of academically and intellectually. And so I think as a result, it was just a different mindset in some way. And in some ways naive, because we didn't see much of the real world through those sort of rose-colored, college town glasses that we sort of grew up in.
David, when you said that you went to Washington and then, sort of to explore the notion of being in public service or, being in the foreign service, and then you said you were really turned off by it. What were the things that really rubbed you the wrong way?
Well, the irony was that I felt like interns were sort of doing, grunt work, and here I was, a political science major, and I'm working very hard at University of Michigan, and I go to Washington D.C. and the interns are doing terrible grunt work. But the other thing about it is that there were no paid internships, at least back then, and I needed to make some money in between my sort of college years, and so I was a bit disheartening because I thought, well, I can't really afford to go back to Washington and try to work on the Hill because I need to make some money. So the next time I went back, it was sort of a combination of not only doing an internship in news, which also didn't pay, but I also combined that with I could type really fast. It was sort of one of the odd things that I learned in high school. I had a great typing teacher and I could type like 90 words a minute. And so somebody said, look, that's a way you can make money. You can be a Kelly boy or girl or whatever they call them. and you can be a temp and you can type. So I typed my way through living in Washington, D.C. the next time I was there, while also doing an internship, and thought, aha, okay, now I know how to make some money in Washington, D.C. And also sort of then fell in love with broadcasting and journalism and the news business.
Were you diminished by the people on the Hill as an intern, or were you helped along? Did they give you access to things? Was there a sense that, hey, I'm trying, these young people volunteer their time, we have them all do all this grunt work, let's try to show them some aspects of this world that might help them beyond this place?
That's a good question, because back in late 1988, 1989, I think Capitol Hill was a very different place than it certainly is now. And I'd say it was more of a party atmosphere. People went to Capitol Hill to, members of Congress went to party. A lot of them partied with the interns. There was all sorts of sexual peccadillos and things that were going on that would be unheard of today. Interns were having all sorts of wild parties, and there wasn't a lot of concern, at least at the internship level, on legislation. And so for me, somebody who took the process of politics a little bit more sort of seriously, and I think I was certainly far more square than the average kid who came to Washington, D.C. to do an internship. I just sort of felt out of place and felt like, well, maybe my own congressman, he's a good guy, but some of these other people in the delegation are jerks, and their staff, they could care less about policies or what they're doing. So it just, something about politics, just at least being inside the political bubble, I guess, I've just found it disheartening. And so, I just felt like, well, but I still love politics and still love policy, but maybe there's a different way of experiencing it.
So then you went into media, and boy, do they cover it well. So that must have worked out much better.
Certainly, but Cenk, when I was at, so my CNN internship turned into a job at CNN, and I worked there from 1990 to 1994. And if there was ever a sort of a glory period for CNN, the first Gulf War, there was anchor Bernie Shaw, there were correspondents John Holloman and Peter Arnett, a Pulitzer Prize winner. I mean, this was like the best sort of role models for journalism, for the news being more important than the people delivering it, and doing it the right way in a cable 24-hour cycle. And it was a terrific learning ground, and I had great role models and great inspiration, so that when I finally decided, okay, now I want to be a reporter myself and go pay my own dues in local news, I know what I need to aim for. I would hate to have to be an intern now at any of these cable news channels looking for role models in terms of what kind of journalism to aspire to, because I don't see that journalism exists. And I don't see the priority of, well, we're going to tell this story whether it gets an audience or not, because it's important for the world and for your community to know about it. That doesn't exist anymore, at least at the traditional mainstream media. But it did exist when I started up, and those were crucial formative years in my sort of imprint of the kind of journalism that I wanted to do.
So David, that's why I go through this, because I just figured you out, right? So you were ruined by two things. One is professor parents who taught you the value of facts. And so one of our co-founders, Dave Kohler, both his parents are physics professors, and physics doesn't care about your feelings. And so when I was growing up, it was arguable who had the better facts, Republicans or Democrats. Now looking back on it, it really wasn't arguable, but I thought it was, right? These days, it's no longer, we know which side has the facts and which doesn't. That's crystal clear, right? And then for those formative years, 90 to 94, where you had really good role models that were journalists, that's why you were screwed in the mainstream media. Doing the right things, focusing on the facts, and being a good journalist, that is not cable news material.
Yeah. God forbid these days you should let the chips fall where they may. But that was what I was taught. So the die was cast for me, I suppose.
Yeah, right. Yeah, indeed. Unbelievably, we're already out of time for the first episode. The second episode, which is just as long, 45 minutes, we'll try to give you a big show, is for the members only. That's tyt.com/join. Much love. We'll see you there. All right, thanks for watching this free clip of Old School. Don't forget to become a TYT member today for the rest of the show and for more exclusive content throughout the network. Join now at tyt.com/join.